Hello and welcome to ABP Live. I have with me today the new ambassador of the European Union to India, Mr. Hervé Delphin, and he's going to talk to us about the relationship that India and the European Union has. It is increasingly taking a strategic look. We also have a very important trade deal that might be coming up pretty soon that's going on for several decades now, but the relationship is also taking a strategic turn. We'll discuss all that and more. Welcome to ABP Live, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. So I'll straight away, dive into the fact that India is now, we can see that the government is focusing on trade deals a lot. In the second run of the Modi government, we just had trade deals with Australia, although the second part with Australia is still sort of pending. Then we have with the UAE and now the EFTA. So the obvious question that comes in, when will the European Union FTA comes into the picture, and the fact that this is one of the oldest negotiations India had been having since 2007, although there was a hiatus and then we renewed the negotiations. And now there are these discussions going on that probably India and the UK will also have an FTA. Can you give us a status as to where the current negotiations are and how hopeful you are about this deal?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think first I'd like to set up the context of the EU-India relationship and strategic partnership has grown exponentially over the past years. It's been really impressive, a sea change. And the FTA is a strong building block of that relation. You pointed out that it's very old negotiations, but I tend to characterize these ones, the resumption, as a FTA 2.0.
Okay, sure.
Because it is really in the light of the new dynamics on the global stage, both economically, things have changed. India has changed tremendously. And that is this background that we also look into the way of engaging in this FTA negotiation that resumed about 2 years ago. So I think both leaders have shown great interest and great support to that negotiations. It could unlock an impressive potential for both economies. The EU is the largest world trade power in the world. It's about over 3 trillion in terms of imports, in terms of exports, and over 2.8 trillion in terms of imports. So we're by far the largest trading force in the power in the world. And we've got over 70 free trade agreements. So 90% of our GDP is also dependent, and our growth is dependent on trade. So trade and openness is part of our DNA. And it is in that context, as the Indian economy is growing tremendously impressive, that it makes sense for the EU and India to have an FTA. So we started, it is at a very strong pace.
Correct.
And we had the negotiations going on. There was a good momentum. The last 7th round of negotiation took place end of February. It came at a moment where India was, as you described, negotiating different FTAs at the same time. So maybe for us it was a bit disappointing in the sense that it didn't make as much progress that we would have liked. But we also understand that India was also negotiating with others. So I think the important point here is that to maintain this momentum in the conversation and in the negotiation, it is a consequential agreement for both sides because of what India represents as an economic force and what the EU represents. So no side should underestimate the difficulty that it represents, but also both sides should also realize that there is political commitment to it. Right. And I think this is what we should not lose sight of. So you refer to other agreements that took place or that are in negotiations, and the EU also have other FTAs in negotiation. We really hope that the momentum can be maintained, and that the next round is to be fixed, the date, so that's not yet the case. And looking constructively to the different components and with the sense of trying to reach an agreement is really what matters at the end of the day in a negotiation. You've seen it with the current EFTA and, negotiation. One might see it with the UK. But I dare to say that the EU is a kind of a even bigger fish.
Yes, of course.
So that is really where I think the stakes are higher, but the potential is even higher. Because by what could be unlocked through this FTA would be enormous and of mutual benefit. And I think this is what everyone should keep in mind.
Well, it's interesting what you said, Ambassador, that you see it as the resumption of the talks as FTA 2.0. Now, the fact is, several commentators and observers over the years have said that while the India-EU relationship has, undergone several dynamics, especially in defense and security, this particular trade deal or the trade aspect has become the biggest stumbling block. And also the fact that, this is one trade deal where India is also being so-called pushed to do more in terms of climate change, labor initiatives, and all of that, which will be probably becoming the part of the trade deal. What do you have to say on that?
First, no one is pushed.
Okay.
It's a negotiation. So it's for India also to assess how much openness, trade openness, it wants to have vis-à-vis the EU and how this serves its long-term economic development interest. This we cannot take it, we cannot put ourselves at the place. But as far as the EU, we've been pretty consistent in our approach, and there is nothing particularly discriminatory towards India. It is the way we approach our FTAs.
With
anyone
all your
knows
trading partners.
They are comprehensive agreements. And it's not just market access. It's creating an economic and trade environment which is pro-business. And every FTAs that we have signed have released benefits for both sides. So there is nothing particular toward India that would come. When you refer to the trade and sustainable development chapter, it corresponds also to an economic reality that the greening of the economy. So the greening and sustainability of the economy is all what we are trying to achieve. We are also partners with India in developing green energy and green infrastructures. So it's not at odds. Now, I think we have built I would say, the elements of the negotiation. There will be, of course, in the course of the negotiations where compromises have to be made. I cannot predict. I'm not the negotiator in chief. But I think there is nothing new in that sense that is really discriminatory in nature or that is aiming at putting more pressure on India. That I think I want to be absolutely clear on that point.
Sure. And also, what about the bilateral investment pact, right? Which was also it's under negotiations whether to make it part of the trade deal, and the fact that European Union also had issues with the way India models the international arbitration.
The arbitration is a specific element of it, and I think that is, for me, I would not really go into that the details of that point, but for me, the important, what I want to underline is the importance of investment agreement. Many European companies are already investing in India.
Yes.
But many, many more would and could invest in India, but having an investment agreement is the key to unlock that potential. Because they want predictability, they want security of investment. And let's be frank, India is a high cost entry market.
Yes.
So I don't think that there is any shyness and caution of the European companies, but like in any other environment, they will look for those. And it's a highly competitive environment. Look at how Malaysia has been able to attract investment and companies for AI, or Vietnam. And I think you have to keep that into the landscape. European companies will go where it's best for business and where there is the best security for investment. On the other hand, you could also look at the fact that FDI level in India is relatively low compared to GDP.
Yes.
I think it's 1.2 or 1.5. Yes. And I think for the good of the long-term economic development of India, attracting FDI is important because that's a long-term, it's locked in long-term investment. It's not a foreign portfolio investment, which is more volatile in nature. So having this investment agreement is also good for FDI for India. So that is really the aim for us. It's a key enabler for European companies to invest in the longer run here in India. And therefore, I think it's something that will happen. I have no doubt about that.
Okay. Now, shifting focus to defense and security, Ambassador, I believe this is the first time the European Union embassy here has a defense attache full-time appointed here. And, you know, this is not something that you do with all countries. You have limited focus for your DS that you've deployed around the world. So this really shows the kind of roadmap that both these sides have in terms of defense and security. How do you see this going into the next level? What is that roadmap, let's say, in the next 5-10 years, according to you?
So you're right. It's our cooperation, our dialogue on security and defense is an absolute success story, considering it started 2 years ago. But from the moment we started until now, it has been on every domain. There has been really splendid cooperation. We see an uptake on both sides to go further and deeper. The current security and defense dialogue, we have a sort of general dialogue, and we've got thematic dialogues. We've got one on counterterrorism, one on maritime security, one on cyber, and the other one on non-proliferation. All these dialogues are running well. We're going to have another round next month. The date is yet to be fully firmed up. But you say for the future. The current framework for the EU-India relation in general is defined by what we call the Roadmap 2025. So next year, we will have to prepare the future roadmap.
Yes.
And I can tell you without, I think, any doubt that the security and defense will be a central plank into this future roadmap because it is in the interest. And why it is in the interest? Because we see that there is a security continuum between what is happening on the European continent, what is happening in the Middle East or West Asia, or what is happening in the Indo-Pacific.
Exactly.
And India, like Europe, we are looking at our interest across the board, and there is so much interconnectedness. And Indian Ocean stand in between, in the middle, and that's the reason why we've been investing a lot in maritime security.
You just had a naval exercise.
We just had
Guinea.
Exactly. We just had. I met with the chief of the Navy yesterday, Admiral Kumar, and we discussed those issues. Indeed, and I think we want to do more. Both sides want to do more. We have now launched this operation EU NAVFOR Aspides in the Red Sea, because it's exactly like the Indian Navy operation, the vessels at sea. It's for defense and deterrence, exactly the same kind of mandate for our own operation. And what we see is that 80% of India trade to Europe goes through that Red Sea, and the same for the EU, maybe less in percentage, but equally important. So we have a mutual interest in cooperation, and that's what we discuss. We want to step up the cooperation at sea, but there are other areas what we are looking at. Space, the security dimension of AI, hybrid threats, undersea. All these areas are areas where we think it's clearly in our mutual interest of deepening the dialogue and enhancing the cooperation. So I have no doubt that this security and defense partnership will be taken to new heights. And I would also like to bring an element that, of course, sometimes people may confuse it, what the EU has to bring in this domain, because assets, military assets, are with member states.
Yes.
There is not yet an EU army per se. But more and more, what people have to realize is that member states place their assets into a EU framework. More and more money is mobilized at the EU level for military operation and now for military defense industry. That was the sense of the adoption about 2 weeks ago of this European Defense Industry Strategy and European Defense Industry Plan. And this element, defense industry, could also become an element of cooperation in the future. So you can see that here there is a lot that can be developed. And this is the fact, as you pointed out, we don't have so many defense attaches in the world, but we place them in areas or in countries where we think it matters most, and it is in the mutual benefit because we receive the accreditation, and it shows also the interest of India, and I think that will also facilitate the dialogue and the cooperation.
So, Ambassador, if I can ask you in the sense that, you know, when you talk about the Red Sea crisis and this Operation Aspides, Germany has recently stated that they'll move in, you know, along with the UK and US. India has deployed 10 of its warships in the Gulf of Aden to Arabian Sea. Do you see this challenge, you know, the impact of the Israel-Hamas war in terms of the Houthis coming into the picture? Has it added on to the challenge in the Indo-Pacific? And vis-a-vis, how big is China a challenge for you in the maritime domain?
So there are two parts to your question.
Sure.
The first is the Red Sea. It's clear that the actions taken by the Houthis have definitely a negative impact. They state that it's related to the conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. But they also have their own interest and their own equities, I would say, the Houthis.
Yes. Okay.
But whatever they do, they are creating chaos and they're creating arms. And we need to sort this out. And as long as they continue, they will face reaction. But the problem is that the chaos that is creating is reviving things that had disappeared. Piracy.
Yes.
There was no act of piracy in the last years. And EU had put an EU naval operation called Atalanta for years, and that helped to quell piracy. And because of the chaos caused now in the region, we see new act of piracy. And that cannot go. That cannot be. And that is also a point that we've discussed with India, is how this multi-threat environment that is created now in the Red Sea, we must really address. For the other part of your question, the free passage, the free access, the free maritime routes is an absolute fundamental principle for the EU. And we say it to all partners, to all actors in the Indo-Pacific. And our Indo-Pacific strategy has a security component. And there we are what we call a security smart enabler. And we are cooperating with all actors, but there is a fundamental principle, which is the freedom of passage and the freedom of access to seas. And any actor that is upsetting that fundamental principle, we will tell this actor that this cannot be. This is detrimental, this is harmful, and it is a threat to stability and security. And on that, we are fully in line with India, and the EU have the same agenda.
But the roadmap, I mean, the EU strategy paper that was released recently, as you talked about it 2 weeks back, it does not really talk about the fact that how China is increasingly, you know, taking away islands after islands in the South China Sea. Does that bother EU? And if that really does, what is the what are the steps you'll be taking to address those challenges?
So, I mean, we have, for example, what happened between China and Philippines.
Yes.
We went public about this issue because what China has done there, we do not accept. It contravenes what has been defined by a ruling under UNCLOS, the law of the sea. So breach of the law of the sea are not acceptable. So preserving that space is absolutely key. And any attempt to change by force this balance, the situation, is not acceptable. And this is, we are saying it very clearly to all partners, and indeed China for that matter.
Okay, okay. Also, Ambassador, lastly, now focusing on the Russia-Ukraine war that has really changed, you know, the geopolitical dynamics within the European Union. Coming to India, EU in that aspect, has the European Union been able to finally understand, now that the war has gone on for more than 2 years, where does India stand? Because I remember initially there were many discussions going on as to why is India not taking a decisive stand against Russia. But, you know, on the contrary, we have seen that India has increased its trade with Russia, increasing oil purchases. Does that still bother European Union, or do you think you've understood the position?
I mean, first, to start with, in this war, there is one aggressor, Russia. Period. And no one can contest that, and the facts are there. The fact that Russia has aggressed in an unprovoked and unjustified manner a neighboring country, we cannot accept that, and we will do whatever it takes to support Ukraine, because it's a direct security threat for Europe. And you can see the way we have supported. Second, so we support Ukraine. Second, we've done everything we could to minimize the impact of this war caused by Russia. The Black Sea Grain Initiative to allow the continuous shipment of very vital grain export to the rest of the world. The EU has done it. To try to cushion the effect on the economy, the global economy, we've been also very active in that respect. So, now, the position of India, they abstain in resolution, and this is an area where we've been in discussion with that. But something that resonates very much with Europeans is what your Prime Minister said. It's no time for war. This war is an unfortunate distraction caused by one country, Russia, while everyone aspires to development, economic development, prosperity, stability. So we have been 2 years in that conflict, one in this war. There's been no serious effort by Russia to genuinely commit to a just peace. But I'm sure that India and Europe are on the same page when it comes to a peace agenda, a just, fair peace initiative. And I think that is the most important element that we should, that I think where EU and India see eye to eye. Okay.
So my last question, Ambassador, since you said this, now keeping aside India's role in all of this, do you see this war, where do you see this heading? Because, you know, there are so many things that have happened in the past 2.5 years. Sanctions after sanctions have been imposed on Russia. Yet there is no let up. Ukraine is having its own issues with the weaponry. How do you see this war? Will it actually end? Is there an end game where you are seeing this from European Union's perspective?
The end game to the war?
You see that coming in? How do you see this panning out finally? How long can it continue?
If one aggressor decides to pull out, it's over in 24 hours. As simple as that. But no one can criticize and object to a country, independent, sovereign country, which fights for itself, for its citizens, for its territory. Ukraine is doing that now. And as long as Ukraine is in this situation and wants to fight for its right, it will have to fight for its right. And it's for the aggressor to take action, not Ukraine. So now there is a war raging on that caused immense suffering. It was not wished by anyone, right, but one country did it. So if this country decides to change action and engage seriously, earnestly in a peace, the thing would be over very quickly. So, and I think signs for that are certainly awaited around the world and certainly in Europe.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your time. That was the Ambassador of European Union to India, talking to ABPLIVE on where the relationship with India is headed. And finally, globally, with 2 wars going on, where are the dynamics that are going to play out in the coming few years? With Naman Mehra on camera, this is Nayanima Basu for ABPLIVE.